Hi, I'm Steve, and it's really nice to be here. The mission of the family is one that I really care about. A number of people in my career since the very beginning helped pay it forward to me, and so it's nice that the mission is something I really believe in, so it's nice to be here, and hopefully a few of the things I'll say tonight are useful. So DICE I'm the Chief Product Officer at DICE. We're an app that helps people figure out where to go out. We offer service in London. We just launched here in Paris. In fact, there are two venues, one called Supersonic, which is an amazing live music venue that's very small, and a club called Sacre that just opened. That I think is the best club in Paris. Those are the exclusive venues that we work with, and we also work with other kinds of venues. My background is that I've been working in mobile and AI for 25 years. At the very beginning of my career, I was at a company called General Magic, which was a spin-out from Apple that tried to build a smartphone in the late 80s. And the rest of my career was just working with the people that I got to meet there. I was in the original iPod team. I had a couple of startups, one that succeeded and one failed in the wrong order. And both of those were very early Facebook platform companies. And so when the second one died, I went to tell Facebook it was dead, and they hired me, and I was there for the last 5 years. And I just quit to join DICE. So I want to just talk about a few of the lessons that I've learned that I wish someone had told me much earlier in my career. You should always work with the very best people. And in my career, I worked often on products that I was really passionate about, and so I had a really interesting career. But sometimes I chose that over the best team, and that was a mistake. I think you just learn so much faster and you have more fun when you work with the very, very best people. Also, the learning curve should always be straight up. You should always feel like you really don't understand most of what you're doing every day. I use Wikipedia still 10 times a day to try to understand better what I'm hearing, and I've been doing that for 25 years. And if it doesn't feel vertical, then you're in the wrong job. You need to have very, very high genetic diversity. I think ecosystems that have high genetic diversity respond to unexpected events much easier. And the same thing is true with teams. You have very highly diverse teams. You can identify and recognize problems much earlier than teams that are uniform. And you should work on things that you're really passionate about, which I've been lucky to do that in my career. And it's impossible to do what we're trying to do. The odds are really stacked against you to run a company. And so if you're working on something that you really think you're trying to change the world, then at least you feel really good about the effort that you're putting in. Because your time is precious and our time on this earth is not really that long, so you should work on things that really count. So the reason why I feel this way is this is the first company where I worked at. And is there audio?
There were no digital cell phones. There was no World Wide Web. We're going to create what comes after the personal computer.
It was a telephone. It was essentially going to be a smartphone with a lot of intelligence.
When we were talking about reinventing telephony, we meant it.
We're trying to make something that people love. We need it to be like your watch, your glasses, your wallet.
We decided to make everything. That meant we were custom building every piece. It's insane.
How small will it finally be, do you think?
Someday, Dick Tracy wristwatch.
This was the beginning of what became, I think, the most important company to come out of Silicon Valley that nobody's ever heard of.
It was this aura of secrecy. You know, it had Apple's fairy dust sprinkled on it. We had no idea what it was, but by the rumors, it seemed just captivating.
We had no choice but to keep quiet about the things we were doing because other companies were interested in it as well.
Now, it should be noted, John Sculley was running Apple at the time.
He was our ally, or so we thought.
Today, we are launching Newton, a revolution for the pocket.
They had decided to make something essentially based on our original models.
It's the most important thing that I've ever been involved with in my entire life.
It's bad enough you get betrayed by them, but now they're going to try to put you out of business.
That was fighting. That was battle.
I mean, here's a test. What if General Magic never happened? Would we have had Android?
Not a chance. I mean, all these things were linked together, one after another.
So much of what came out of General Magic is the foundation of everything we take for granted today.
So the question is, can we take these powerful tools and do something that really does help a lot of people?
The reason you should care about the story of General Magic is because it involves something fundamental, and that is, failure isn't the end. Failure is actually the beginning.
So I was very lucky to work there straight out of university. I had to work for free to get through the door because everyone else was a rock star and I was a nobody. But the lessons I learned there set me up for the rest of my career. So here are some of them. So it's all about moving fast. You know, Apple, where I worked, basically the approach was to build products very slowly and perfectly, patent like crazy, and then sue anybody else who came close. And obviously, that doesn't work anymore if you look at the progress of Samsung and Huawei. So now the approach is to go as fast as you can and to optimize for speed, which was Facebook. Facebook is optimized for speed. The company is open plan. When you meet with Mark, you never leave the room without a decision of at least this is what we're going to do between now and the next meeting. The source code is available to every engineer. I could log into anybody else's groups and see what other product teams were doing. I could get the same information that the engineers in that product team were doing. And so that allowed the company to move faster by pushing information lower down into the company so people could make their own autonomous decisions, which I thought was really unusual and completely different than my experience at Apple and other companies like that. And Elon at Tesla is another example. So this was the wall at the entrance to Tesla. It used to be full of their patents. And then one day he decided, you know what? We're going to open source all of the patents because not only will we get feedback from the open source community about the quality of our work, but also we'll attract better engineering talent as they see what kinds of work we're doing in R&D. And this is another example where just the rules have totally changed about speed. It's all about speed. So in terms of product, I like to think about things in terms of magic moments where you really do something really amazing for the person. So you want to think about what's really meaningful in your product. What's really at the heart of the product? Why does the product exist? And then think about what's that moment when you can convey to the user why they love your product. And what's the reason, and maybe even like role play, what do you want them to say when one of their friends asks them about the app? Or what do you want them to say when they describe your app in a sentence? And there's that. So for the iPod, the one-liner was 1,000 songs in your pocket. And interestingly, the way that Steve used to make product teams is, like you were describing earlier, you put the product team and the marketing team together in a room, and the product person describes what it is that they want to build, and if the marketing team can't immediately imagine, or over time imagine, the TV commercial and the billboard and the banner ad, then the product isn't ready to be started. So that kind of the co-development of the product between the marketing person and the product person has to start at the very beginning, just like you were saying. So here are some magic moments in DICE. The first one, DICE, as I was saying, it's a way to go out and buy tickets to go to live music and to cultural events. So the first one is to transfer your tickets to another friend for free. The second one is that the app, through the AI work that we do, recommends gigs to you or cultural events to you based on things that we observe that you do, and also if you scan your Spotify music library, for example. And the third one is, if the show is sold out, you can join a waiting list. And as soon as a ticket is returned by someone who doesn't want to go, or more tickets are released, then you get in off the waiting list. And so there's no scalping. There's no second market for tickets. So everyone's happier. The artist makes more money. The fans get into the shows that they want to see. And you can be very generous to your friends by buying multiple tickets and sharing them effortlessly. So these are the kind of moments that can turn the ticketing experience on its head. And the way we got to these magic moments was to do a thing called a day in the life. So this is where you imagine that you're a user and you describe their day, or maybe their week, where from the first time that they think about what they want to do, what show they want to see, and what's the process that they go through to get the app, download the app, use it, and go to a show. And that also relates to the growth stuff that we were talking about earlier, in terms of how is the show discovered, how is the app discovered, and that helps you to really polish that journey for the user, as well as understand inside the app, what should the first-time user experience be like. And so that's also a way to be really creative, because you start to think about, well, you don't go to a show by yourself, you invite your friends. So how does the fan invite their friends to come along, so on. So Day in the Life is another Apple thing that I think is really, really useful. So now here's some suggestions. This book is, I think, the very best book ever written about startups. There's a professor named Steve Blank at Stanford. This is the book that Kleiner Perkins, that Andreessen Horowitz, that Floodgate, everyone gives to their portfolio companies. The process described in this book is called customer discovery, where before you even build anything, you conceive of the product, and you go and meet with target customers. And you ask them, you describe the product to them, and you say, does this meet your needs? And then you ask them, would you use this today if it was free? Which is a really interesting question, because then suddenly they have to think about all the other things that they would have to do to deploy your product independently of the price. And this leads to a lot of really valuable information, independently of them having to worry about you selling them something. So this trick is really powerful. And then the last bit is then you ask them, well, what would you pay for it? As opposed to telling them what it costs. And in my experience, and in experience of many people in the Valley, this is a really great way to decide what your product should be and how to go to market. So that book, it's a little pedantic. It's a little bit like reading a diet book because it's so structured, but it's very, very useful. Another lesson is, if you user test with 5 people, you get a really good sense of where your product's at. So what we do at Dice and what I've done in other companies is we just user test very, very rapidly with 5 people. Multiple times a week, we'll have groups of 5 people testing new features. And if you see consensus, or even 4 out of 5, you know you have a problem, or you know you have something that's winning. And I highly recommend rapid prototyping on paper, or if you have someone who's really great with tools, you can also do tools. For example, Twitter, the actual drawing that was done, the original drawing, that's framed on this really fancy frame in the wall, in the hall of the reception area at Twitter. That sort of approach is so fundamental to the company. And one bit of advice when you're doing user testing is don't lead the subjects. So you know the product very well, and it's very easy to ask very leading questions like these. It's much better to ask a very generic question and to let them answer. So for example, I will say things like, what do you see? Or if you wanted to buy a ticket, what would you do here? And then just let them struggle and make them talk out loud to you about what they're thinking. And it's a really powerful way to understand what's working, what isn't working in your design. Some other things, the last 8 years of my career has been mostly in machine learning and AI. There's some very, very powerful tools to track the progress of products. This particular blog from Social Capital, Jonathan's no longer at the firm, but this blog is very detailed about growth analytics for your product and whether you're meeting a product need. And this YouTube video, Alex Schultz invented growth marketing. He's a genius, has been at Facebook from the very, very beginning. He was the one who decided to take Messenger out of Facebook, for example. And there's a very few cases where he's interviewed, but there are 3 of them on YouTube. So if you search Alex Schultz growth, this is extremely high value time. And this graph is a retention graph, which is from the day that your product is downloaded by the user, how many of them remain active. And what happens is if you have a product that's really good, this graph flattens out. And the higher you are, the better off you are. If you're not a good product, that will go down. And so evolving your product until you have a flat line or even an uptick at the end is where you want to get. And that's when you get to that point, that's when you grow. That's when you're ready for B round capital, to grow, to scale. Until you have a flat line, you're just pouring money down the tube. The other tool, have any of you seen this? How many of you have seen one of these? Oh, a lot of you. So sorry if this is boring, but this is called a triangle graph. This is about the cohort of people. So these are people that joined on April 27th, which is when the service started. And you see that there's 17 weeks of history, right? And these are the people that just started today. So what this allows you to do is this allows you to look in 3 ways. The first way is, for the people who are in this cohort, where do they start to die off? The second way to look, so that's looking straight across the cohorts of everyone who joined the same week. The second view is to look, is there something that happens to everybody in week 9 or in week 4? And then the other way to look is diagonally to see on this particular date what happened. And so this tool is very useful, not only for your whole product, but even at a feature level or on a segment level. So you can say, look, I want to just look at women aged 18 to 34. What's happening with them? And this is a very, very quick visual way to see, okay, I have a problem. Or some event happened on that day that I need to investigate. So back to the mission. And lastly, these are some references to people that I think really, really know what they're doing. Mary Meeker was a Kleiner. Her State of the Internet helps you understand sort of the really big opportunities. Because if you want to create a really impactful company, you want to focus on the biggest market you can find. And so her research is great at identifying these really big trends. Bill Gurley is the best economist in venture. He's on Twitter, and he has a couple of talks on YouTube. He dissects business models in a way that I've never, ever seen anybody do. Mike Maples, I think, is the best seed investor in the world. He was very, very early in a bunch of companies that are beginning to IPO now, and he's very generous with his time to people. He's very interesting. Alex Schultz, I mentioned. Steve Blank's book. Ben Horowitz, he's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz. He took a company from bankruptcy to IPO, which never happens. And so this book is about how brutally difficult it is to be a CEO. And I had a really hard time a few times as CEO, and this book was a reminder that I wasn't alone, and it has lots of also great lessons about how to product manage things well. And then lastly, for the CEOs in the audience, the very best book about being CEO and how to run a company is from Jack Welch. He's the longtime CEO of General Electric. What's his name? The billionaire who has the big fund, American billionaire who owns Dairy Queen. I forget. Anyway, his one-liner was, there never needs to be another management book after this one. And I agree. It's so simple and clear. And the really big lesson from this book, the first chapter is about being candid and about being honest and direct with each other and creating a culture in the company that allows you to do that. And that was one of my big mistakes in my startup that failed, was there were a lot of hard things that happened in the company, and a lot of times I kept telling the employees everything's fine when they weren't. And had I been more candid with them, they would have been more helpful in coming up with better solutions. So I think that message of candor is really, really useful. And that's an easy read and very useful. So hopefully that was of some use to you. And happy to take questions.
Thank you for the intervention. You were talking about doing fast more than ever. Why? Oh, it's not an oriented question, but is it more difficult for marketplace or easier for marketplace today?
Yeah. So the reason why speed is important is because you're going to make lots of mistakes. And so the faster that you move, the earlier that you can detect you have a problem and you can adapt. But I think that applies to any company, not just marketplaces. Because the access to information is so universal now, and also access to education. Like the idea that you can come here or you can watch online Coursera classes on AI, that didn't exist 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And so the distribution of the knowledge of how to do these things is much broader than it used to be. And so the old way of working, like patents and so on, they don't work anymore. It's all about speed and being honest with yourself and measuring progress of the things that you're building to know what's working, what isn't. Did that answer your question or not?
But as a marketplace, you work with partners, so you depend of the type of kind of partners you have. Are they also fast?
Yeah, no, many of them are not fast. So the problem then becomes understanding what their problems are and how to solve them, and that's where the speed on your side wins. Because when by user testing and interacting with customers, you learn very quickly, and you get to a point where you have a product that works that then can scale. Because very often you can get fooled by the first 1 or 2 customers who lead you off into a direction that won't scale. That's why the customer discovery is so useful, because you can talk to hundreds of customers before you even try to sell something or even before you build anything. So just you alone as a founder with an idea before you even have a team or venture or financing, you can get pretty close to product market fit on paper, which is very useful.
Hi, thank you. I just have one question. How do you identify the best talent? I mean, is there any advice? Do you have some particular points? Because there are many people with different skills.
Yeah.
So do you have any set of rules, say that this person is good for my team?
So that's a great question. In my experience, the very best people are people who are interested in many things. And so you want to see a real diversity of interests from them. One of the really great interview techniques that I've seen used that works is you ask them a question. You ask them, what's the most difficult time you ever had to do X? And then you ask them to give 1 or 2 more examples of that. So if they can just rattle off difficult challenges and how they solve them, and they continue to stay kind of upbeat and energetic, then you know you have somebody who knows what they're doing and they love to tackle challenges. If you find that they've struggled to find multiple examples or their kind of energy drops, then it's a really bad sign. So, and also just, I think just sheer intellectual curiosity is also something interesting, is really important too. Like asking them what they do in their free time and then sort of have them explain in detail what do they love about that sport or that artist or whatever. That's also a really telling sign that they're intellectually curious. Generally, I think hiring young people who are really smart and who are really committed is almost always better than hiring people with a lot of experience. I'm glad the CEO of DICE didn't hear that before hiring me, but I believe that.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So basically my question maybe is a bit general about my experience because I'm working for a bike sharing company in Paris. Okay. And right now we're having so much competition from other e-scooters and e-pets. So the question we're facing right now is actually we're losing quite a bit of our users due to the competition. So what do you think? Do you think our focus is here to pay more attention to really spend more efforts into maintaining our current user portfolio or really like try to expand our current region to reach out to more users?
Yeah, so resurrection and retention is what kills you.
Yeah.
So churn is fine. Every business has a lot of customer churn because what will happen is they'll be in like in your example, they'll be in an area where there isn't a bike that is yours, for example. But what you want to be able to see is you want to see those users, even if they churn, you want to see them come back. And that's the metric that really matters over time. So initially, it's just all new user growth. Then you very rapidly get to a point where it's mostly about churn and hoping that your retention, which is keeping a user active, or resurrection, which is the user drops out and comes back later, that can exceed churn over time. So Facebook, Twitter, that's basically where they're at. They're in the stage of the development of the company where they're trying to have resurrection and retention be higher than churn. That's how they grow. But like the particular market you're in is really challenging, I think, because the capital expenditure is very, very high. But you want to have broad coverage for people to feel like this is a service I can use everywhere. But I'm hopeful that those businesses work because I love that. I actually have a folding bike helmet that I carry with me in my pack because I use all those services every city I go to because it's so much better than sitting in a car. So I wish you luck.
Oh, thank you.
So you were saying that consumers could mislead you to take the wrong direction. Yep. How do you choose your users for testing? What metrics do you look at?
Yeah, so the day in the life is useful creatively to come up with some scenarios that you think will work for what you think is your target market. And then user testing those people, even if the product's on paper, with those segments is how you begin to understand whether that segment's going to work for you. And so you have to do more of that than if you invest in that and you invest in customer discovery, then you're way more likely to be early in your markets. So for consumers, that works pretty well. On B2B, the customer discovery is even more important because on B2B, the first 2 or 3 meetings, you can meet with these dream customers who have big money and they look like they're going to go big, and they could be taking you in absolutely the wrong direction. So if I was in a B2B business, I wouldn't commit until I'd had 20, 30, 40, 50 customer discovery meetings. And that's why that book is so useful, because it has this boring but rigorous process to make sure that you don't make that mistake. But it's hard. Consumers are fickle, right? Building consumer products is really hard, but that's also why it's fun. It's so fun to see people who are using things that you built, and when you tell them that you work there, they have these great stories to tell, and there's nothing like consumer, but it's hard.
So what's your best advice when you start to build a consumer app, for example?
Yeah. So in my experience, it's what I was saying earlier. You come up with some really compelling day-in-the-life user stories that are just much better than the experience that you can get today from any other product in that area. Then make really detailed, fairly complete user interface designs, and then user test those. And if people react positively to that, then you have a shot. And that's easy to do. Like you can do that with one person and a relatively small budget to recruit people to come in for user testing. But it's still very, very difficult. But that's why we're here, right? Because it's exciting, and if you pick the right, that's why I was saying, like, you have to pick a product you're really passionate about, and you should pick things that really improve things in the world significantly. Like, I love live music, and I hated people taking my money or having to pay hundreds of pounds or euros to go see a show. And I also wasn't great at always knowing what shows to see, and so the idea that I could transform all of that gets me really excited. But you have to be at that level of commitment, or it'll never work, because what you're trying to do is really, really difficult.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. So I work at Rakuten, the e-commerce marketplace, and as kind of everybody can know, e-commerce is very, very competitive, and the best way to survive is to go fast. In our product team, we're like always trying to find kind of new ways to go faster and faster, using new methods such as like having burden charts, always estimating very sharply the project time, development, and just finding kind of all new ways, even the most MVP of MVP possible. I was just wondering, because we're trying to find any kind of new ways, if you have maybe perhaps any tips and tricks, or what is the best maybe a souvenir you had of a fast way to develop?
Yeah, so, and by the way, the Rakuten virtual network that you're trying to launch in Japan is incredibly exciting. I used to work on connectivity, and that program has everyone scared witless in telco, so that's a great project. So the Facebook experience was really interesting because Facebook spent an enormous amount of energy and time building infrastructure to allow developers to push code just continuously, but also build A/B tests that could run at massive scale. So there are thousands and thousands of different builds of the Facebook application at the field at any one time running A/B testing. And so that was really interesting. I'd never seen that before. And that takes a significant investment, and at the scale of Rakuten, you can afford it. That's the kind of thing you can't do as a startup. But when you start to get to scale, building tools that allow your development team to go as fast as they want and to test whatever they want is really powerful. And I would definitely do that. Yep. Okay, thank you. Sorry, one more. Okay. You want to ask one? Yeah. So DICE, I was hired to DICE just a few months ago. That company's existed for 4 years. But my startup that died, I hired a design company. And it was a terrible mistake. Because the design of how the product looks and the brand of the product is so core to the business that those people need to be part of the company so that they can steer you when you're doing the things that are wrong. And people's first impression of something is so important that without those resources in the team, you're really lost. Like Walt Disney, when he made Snow White, which I think is the best of the animated films, the trio of people that were in the room were the person who owned the script, the director, and the artist. And so they had this war room where they storyboarded the whole movie, and that allowed them to very, very rapidly create new looks and feels for the scenes, and that's how you should run a company. That's how you should build a product. It's just like that. You need the engineer, the growth person, and the designer. You need them to be sitting right next to each other. Yeah.
Your life on